Hey guys, Novo here. Before we start the show, we have an announcement. Novo Day Productions is partnering with a very special organization, the Shine with Joy Foundation, a nonprofit that is near and dear to our hearts because it honors an NDB friend and contributor who lost their life way too early to maternal sepsis. And through them, with your generosity, you won't only help raise awareness on how to prevent sepsis, but also empower change through scholarships and grants in the fields of STEM. So please donate today and help us make tomorrow a better place. You can donate right now, in fact, on shinewithjoy.com. That's shinewithjoy.com. SHINEWITHJOY.com. More details on how will be in the show notes below. Now, back to the show. Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art and, well, the arts again, with our ever-evolving open discussion segment, Is It Art? Focusing today on animation. Ooh, little curveball for you. Specifically, anime. More specifically, the history of anime in the West, where today we pose this question for you guys. Has the anime that we've got in the West diluted? That's what we'll try to answer today. To hash things out, I am joined by one of our favorites. That is Mr. New Mike, Philip Church. Philip, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. And I also have a sinus infection.
So he's going to sound real sexy, a little
That's
raspy.
Guys.
That's how I throw my spin on a sinus infection or a cold or whatever. Is I just sound raspy and sexy today.
Technically speaking, there's nothing wrong with how I sound. It's just not my normal voice. Like if I were to try to go to work with this right now, people would be like, "Phil, what did you do?"
I think he's just bringing the Barry White today,
just bringing the
sexy back.
Mm-hmm.
So. But before we bring a lot more of that sexy back, let's tell the good people why. So, Philip has been thinking about 90s anime a lot lately. We've been talking about this off air, backstage, a lot of DragonBall talks. And so we knew there was a show in there. So we're going to start there. Philip, tell us why you've had the anime on your mind so much lately.
The best way I can think to describe
where to begin. How much time do you guys got?
No, I knew you were going to ask, so I genuinely tried to prepare an answer. The best I've got is that, like a lot of things that you loved dearly in your youth but have sort of outgrown, it's nice to return to these things. And it's never been easier with certain types of media to where you can just kind of re-binge, your favorite old shows or movies these days, right? But even beyond that, even just thinking about what a cultural phenomenon that not only Dragon Ball Z was, but just a lot of the other 90s anime, between especially Pokemon at the latter end, but then like Sailor Moon and Gundam and God, Cowboy Bebop. Like the 90s was insane as far as introducing a boatload, almost pun intended,
Love it.
of brand new media and just ripping open a new market that just blew up. And I mean, it was clearly just a matter of time because it's so cool to be a nerd these days, Like, and like when I grew up, anime was such a dorky thing. I got picked on.
Oh,
like
totally.
Yeah.
Yep,
so it's
same.
so interesting. And I was thinking about things like that, about, like, God, these days I can just be like, I'm watching an old Dragon Ball Z movie. Everybody can suck it. And there's nothing to defend anymore, at least maybe I'm just matured as a person to that point. But yeah, it was just neat to think about how that stuff exploded and the myriad ways that it clearly bled into our Western culture.
There was something about it. I will never forget those commercials. And they would do these late at night, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning and it was always like a quick cut. And I remember it being, one word that comes to mind is it was kind of seductive, and I want it. There's a lot to discuss, but before we do, guys, we're going to take a little break. Stay with us.
The best way to say thank you and to support us is by donating to the cause. In doing so, you'll be able to help us help fellow artists, creatives, and colleagues, promoting their work, the community as a whole, and why we got into this line of work to begin with, to not only make art, but also shine a light on our peers and the gems of the world. For all the hidden ones and the not so hidden that make life worth living. Because if we can make things even a little bit better, it'll all be worth it. But we can't do this without you. So please, donate today. And remember, even a little goes a long way to build new bridges, new worlds, and new opportunities. Link and details on how can be found in the show notes below. Because together, we can do anything.
And we're back to conquer the world. So, guys, if you are new to this format or just haven't hung with us in a while, we like to break this show down with a very simple premise. That is a little bit of past, a little bit of present, and then we like to talk about the future. Past, present, future, easy, okay? So what we're going to do first, obviously, is talk about the past so we can talk about the present and obviously lead into the future. What I wanted to talk about first, Philip, is simple because there was a clear difference in the animation we had in the West and the animation we saw at the East that we wanted so bad, that was seductive, that was foreign, that was, man, I wanted to get my hands on it so badly. And part of the reason when I was thinking about this piece, I realized there was a different approach to animation in our different cultures. In the East, anime is often made for both children and adults, where in the West, we would sometimes just see that animation was made for children, a la cartoons. In fact, I had a battle with my parents a lot. I don't know if you could relate to this, where they would see me getting older and older and older and watching more and more animation, and they would say stuff like, are you still watching this stuff? Like, isn't this, like, aren't you too old for
Oh, yeah.
this? And I would constantly have to go back to, like, this is made for adults. The stuff I'm watching is not made for children. These are not cartoons. These are animated stories with grit, sometimes violence, sometimes language, sometimes sexual imagery. This is for adults. And that's where I wanted to start, is just the differences in cultures. And then yeah, kind of starting about 80s, late 80s, of course, 90s, when we're starting to get more of specific anime in the West and kind of what we were seeing to begin with, because it wasn't really let's be honest, the anime that they had in the East. It was heavily edited, but we'll get there. So let's just start there, Philip. What did you see as a cultural difference before you even really got into to the animation of the East's worlds?
I mean, when you're taking in something that is literally a visual media, the first thing that you're noticing is, the visuals. And even just thinking about the comparisons at the time, looking at whether it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles compared to anime or whatever, I do think that was part of, that draw, that like just mystic appeal to it, that it was so new and different, and like, wow, there's something that looks like what now? And then I think the second layer to this is that it doesn't even take too much time to either find the kind of show that really just marries a lot of Eastern and Western concepts, to where it's one thing that to see something that's very different, but not really know a good entry point. But really, like isekais, for instance, the genre where somebody's transported to like a whole different world, essentially, and they kind of have to reboot their life in order to like survive and thrive in this new world, if not also look for a way home. That's the same thing that we've been doing over here, right? That we had, however far what you want to go back, like Gulliver's Travels, Alice in Wonderland, and Narnia. There's tons of versions of stuff like that. So those to me were the main appeals, until you started to get the time to dive into something. And then, yeah, another thing to point out is that there really wasn't that much. I mean, outside of the rare, very niche and famous for it stuff like, like Heavy Metal, the old cartoons
Oh
where
God,
they loved to
yes.
tease huge jugs.
Like South Park style.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
basically. No, that episode was spot on. It was
Soapy
hilarious. But
you can bathe in
sexuality
the
and nudity and stuff is just so normal to a lot of non-American cultures, including Japanese culture specifically. You go watch other contemporary Japanese movies, like even Studio Ghibli's My Neighbor Totoro, right?
Right.
There's a scene where the dad and daughters are all naked bathing together. It's not like a crazy thing to them. They're just more a little. They view nudity and sexuality differently.
I will never forget Akira when there was that scene where I was like, is that a boob, right? Is that a breast right
Yep.
there? And it was, I think the beauty of I think there's nothing wrong with nudity or sexuality in storytelling and even animation if it serves the story, right? If it's just gratuitous, it's hentai, right? Hentai,
Hentai.
hentai. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
to a degree. It's funny. Hentai literally just means pervert or like
oh, does it?
perverted.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
it's funny. So it doesn't always imply.
Well, I feel like that's a big difference between our cultures as well, right? Is, where a lot of their pornography, like when it is gratuitous, it has to be animated, and a lot of, a lot of these Eastern cultures where we would never see that. We got the real, we had Playboys and Penthouse and things like that in the West, but my point is that we're straying into an interesting T-book tangent corner here. Let me pull it back. My point is that when things that are gratuitous or not gratuitous, when things that are challenging imagery serves the story, then it seems it's like, oh well, that's supposed to be there. Like it's not that big of a deal. Like it's not that bad. But I just remember the ultimate point is the dichotomy of feeling like, man, I never ever see that. Even in the heavy metal examples and stuff
Mhm,
like that, I
yeah.
would never see that with the stuff we had in the West, but I would still see it in the East, even when it's not something that is this larger than life
Even in like
moment.
a Dragon Ball, like original Dragon
Yeah. Oh,
Ball,
yeah.
when Goku
We
was a
got some
kid,
butts.
there's
Yeah.
butts and I mean
We got
scenes
some
where I'm almost
butts.
positive like Bulma was either topless or like bottomless, and that he like straight up is he's a boy who was never taught about girls. There's a part where he's genuinely confused by her crotch. Like it's just a whole different approach.
Was
And
that
also,
I have
like,
to ask,
to
was that your entry point in really getting into anime in the
interestingly,
West?
it was Dragon Ball Z, but I do remember
Okay,
trying to
mine
watch
was Dragon
Dragon
Ball Z
Ball
too.
because it felt like, okay, well, if I like Dragon Ball Z, let me watch the quote unquote first one. They were different enough and it didn't matter. It was a whole new take on like the Goku's
Well, I think this
world.
is a good segue because I didn't know your exact entry point into really falling in love with anime.
It's tricky because I've loved Japanese stuff my whole life. I mean, I minored in Japanese studies and I lived there for 4 months in
Yeah.
college. And also I do want to point out I got that backwards. Hentai is actually specific. It's both anime and manga. It's like it is this whole thing, so that you don't even have to say a hentai anime. That's almost
Mm,
redundant. Hentai is specifically the subset of manga and anime. That is
but
like
that is like
overtly
pornography,
sexual, like
like yeah,
very sexual. But
gratuitous.
but yeah,
Yeah.
so to go back to the other point though, like the rest of it when it is a little more normalized
Yeah.
is not considered like any nudity or sex is not considered hentai. But yeah, back to the to your actual point there too. Just before I had to correct my own self, my own Japanese minor. It's hard to pinpoint what it was, but I really feel like it all for me comes back to Dragon Ball Z, just inspiring this immense curiosity into just okay, well, this cartoon from this place that I really don't know much about is my new favorite thing in the world. What else can I learn?
Well, I'm really glad again, I'm really glad we're discovering things like this on air because I didn't know where the exact gateway drug was, and that was a lot of it for me where I really got. I mean, I think I saw Akira and some other like films before I got into Dragon Ball Z, but Dragon Ball Z is I think where I became an obsessed fan where I wanted to learn every character's name and their backstory and every season's like plot change and every big, the big bad, the big boss.
Obsessed is a good way to describe it for me.
Where yeah, where I wanted to learn every nuance of the world and the lore and the characters, and I just found myself completely immersing myself into these worlds and learning about it, and that's when I realized this is the ultimate. This is why I wanted to segue into anime in the West, is because I realized that what we were getting in the West was dramatically different than what they got in the East. Like it was so heavily edited for our kind of an audience. Again,
Oh
more of
yeah.
like, well, oh, this is animation, so it's and here in the West it's cartoons, and cartoons are for kids. So it blew my mind when I actually started studying the pure unedited Japanese versions, that the violence was sometimes extreme. They would like decapitate people,
Oh, yeah.
like blow holes through people.
Did you ever see Fist of the North Star?
Yes, I did.
Again, that one's a kind of predates it. It's not necessarily part of the '90s boom, but because of how hyper violent that was, it never would have sold. It had to take
Oh,
other things to generate enough interest to where people are like, okay, well, if they want it, then I guess we'll sell it to them for money. But other than that, it wasn't just like hey, here's art and let's show it to the West.
yeah, well, like, to your point, the Toonami things, like, when they tried to syndicate it, when they tried to get it
Yeah.
on just regular TV or cable television, and I was flabbergasted at the differences in graphic language, graphic imagery, graphic violence, like, and I realized it kind of, I wouldn't say destroyed the soul of the show, but it definitely transformed it. Like, it wasn't
It did feel more pure in the original
right, and
forms,
so that's why
especially with
and
the
then I
original
suddenly
voices. I'm a subtitles guy to this
oh,
day.
yeah, and that's when I found myself like, I gotta get my hands on these, like, subtitled, unedited, copies, and that's when I got, like, bootleg VHS copies of the films
Still
and
have
stuff
mine.
like
I just need a
that,
working
and
VCR.
and I realized that was just, like, a good starting point of, like, okay, this is a perfect paradigm of how much changes. So I would say for the past, like, in the beginning, I would say what we got was diluted. It
It
was not its truest form.
it definitely is, but I mean, it does still have to kind of be traced back to what you pointed out a moment ago, which is that it was seen as cartoons. It was supposed to be for kids, and until they did that framing of it,
Yeah,
when the people with the actual purse strings were going to approve, again, our parents, right? Like I
right.
wasn't the one with more than really
It's
just a
still a
paltry
business, yeah,
allowance. So, I
right.
mean, to be able to like have those channels, you had to have parents that could afford cable, or you had to have parents who like if you some way to get enough allowance or money. Because again, like I'm talking like I was 8, 9, 10, but I found ways to get my hands on those things one way or another. And I do think another aspect of how it was so easy to wrench it open is that the crowbar was massive. If you think about the various things that came together across multiple audiences, you had earlier in the '90s, you definitely had Sailor Moon for girls, and Dragon Ball Z was definitely like more boyish. But you
Sure.
still also had stuff like your Cowboy Bebop and Neon Genesis Evangelion that
Yeah,
genuinely were for not necessarily purely adults. I mean, you could be a young adult. It needed a certain maturity level to be able to appreciate them, right? And especially to stick with some of the plots of like even the Cowboy Bebop episodes. I mean, not all of them were as brilliant as the others, but that stuff was masterful in just the
yeah,
quality. And I think that's another thing that really forced our eyes just wide open and why we were agape looking at this is that the quality again it's because of the audience of the East it was treated with more respect than these children's cartoons of the West. And so I think that was just another reason that it was hard not to take them seriously was just
mm,
looking at the quality, looking at the breadth and depth of them. And then especially by the late '90s when you had Pokemon, that was the nail in the coffin. Is to this day one of the biggest international phenomenon, right? And so again, it was simply a matter of time before the floodgates were open, and thank goodness it did happen because it's also just it's had such an awesome influence on our own Western art. I feel like, especially the way that media has changed, that of course we basically get the anime as new as it is. I don't really keep up with any, to be honest, these days. I don't actually watch much anymore, but it's not this thing where it takes forever to get produced in Japan, then it takes forever for like the rights, the dubbing, all that stuff. Yeah, it was months. There was lag, right? There was genuinely international lag. These days with technology, that lag is shorter, but also just with the fact that again, so many things have matured in general. I swear there's stuff that's like seeing things that are, rated Y7 or this, that, and the other these days, it feels different from when we were kids.
well, absolutely. I think it has gotten better as the market has flourished and evolved, and clearly Western audiences are saying to the Eastern, creators, like, we love this stuff. We in fact we like it in its purest form. Give us that. We
Yeah.
don't want the heavily edited stuff. And so I mean, before we get to the present, I do have to ask. So after Dragon Ball Z, leading to the present, did you get into any other seasonal television show with multiple plot lines and seasons and stuff like that, or was it Pokemon and then nothing
I
after
actually
that?
so I didn't like Pokemon, but besides the Game Boy games, those games were amazing. They were just fantastic RPGs. I did end up
I've
loving
never played the games, never played the
Death.
cards, nothing.
Yeah, I didn't do the cards. I didn't actually like the show,
I
but
watched
that
the show a little
that
bit.
Game Boy game was the jam, dude. Red and blue, holy crap! Those
I
were
know that's an OG for a lot of
that's
people.
where it was
Yeah.
at. I will always give those games the credit they deserve. But yeah, Cowboy Bebop. It wasn't exactly seasonal. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, after Dragon Ball Z for me, that was it. I never I kept watching films like we did
I think
our
I like more anthological stuff. I don't like the big
like
ones that drag
Studio
on.
Ghibli, like we've done
Yeah,
our
we've talked about
career
movies plenty.
retrospective.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
but
I still keep up with
Death Note,
films
for
and stuff
instance,
like that.
Death Note. Like, if you've never watched Death Note, dude, you really genuinely should. It,
I
it
hear that a lot
it's
from
really
my
hard
own
to
wife,
explain how
Viva
good it
Del
is, but
Rio.
it's so good at being both the grounded aspects of the cat and mouse game with like the detective and the killer and stuff.
So DBZ and then Death Note
Cowboy
and
Bebop.
Cowboy Bebop is the ones you've seen from beginning to end for the most part.
Yeah, those are like my big ones. And then I know I've dabbled here and there, and I definitely watched a lot of other stuff that was just on cable for funsies here and there.
Yeah.
But as far as things that I truly sought out and consumed the hell out of and still carry with me, those were like my big threes: Dragon Ball Z, Bebop, and Death Note. Pretty generic. Again, I'm not some hardcore, like otaku or anything. I have a love and appreciation for Japanese culture in general, and
I
again,
was
I
for
always
Dragon
will.
Ball Z, right? I think we all were for Dragon Ball Z for a little
Yeah.
bit. And then once we got a little older and that I wouldn't say the franchise we like exhausted everything because they're still making new stuff to this day, right? It's like kind of this endless well of material in a lot of senses because there's so many characters and plot lines they can play with. But there was an element of like I did grow up and I still loved anime and animation stuff like that. But I think that's why I think I gravitated to more of the films. I wanted more of this concise, 2 hour story than, an entire 30-minute episode where we're talking to Piccolo about nothing for
Yeah.
for way
The
too
pacing
long.
left something to be
Yeah.
desired sometimes.
So that brings us to the present. That brings us to the present.
And here
So
we are.
let's discuss. We kind of touched on this, like like I kind of gave a little bit of my piece on clearly what the audience was wanting. Like I think we screamed loud and clear. We want what you're making in its purest form.
And then we still had our own reaction to it. Like we had an instant reaction.
That's my first question for you. Do you still notice, I think because of how our eyes are, we're very analytical art, artists, but art digesters too, like how we digest. And when we become the audience, we can't help but have that analytical eye. Do you still feel like it's still heavily edited to this day?
Probably, I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either. I will say this. I actually had to do some serious soul searching. And the answer is one of those answers that people hate because the real answer is it depends. When it is a little more geared towards like the family oriented markets and a little more of the younger stuff, the younger kids, even probably a little bit of Dragon Ball to this day, it is probably a little more edited than it should be. But I have noticed that, yeah, obviously, the stuff that is a little and clearly not made for a family friendly audience or just children or even younger teens, older teens, definitely adults. That is like sometimes they could probably afford to edit it a little bit. Some of the I see today, or I'm like, Jesus, tap dancing Christ, this is a lot.
I do think the approaches have also changed in the 90s wasn't spot on for all the various media, but between the late 80s and 90s, if not even the early aughties, you had this weird brutalist hardcoreism ripple through various media at different times, but like comic books had Frank Miller, and then suddenly you had like the modern badass version of Batman, and he stopped being so cartoonish, and superheroes started killing. Video games as well as anime showed up, and all of a sudden cartoons are either brutal or very sexy, if not a weird, disturbing combination of both. And even among movies, you had a lot of resurgence of indie feeling, grindhousey stuff that came about. So it's not unique to any of the mediums, but it is interesting the order in which it sort of happened over
Mm.
those roughly 2-ish decades overall, I would say. It's such a fun phenomenon how to sort of trace how things have adapted to where, like, because these days you have so much modern tropes. For instance, the whole, oh, no one's really a bad guy. Every character is sympathetic now. The bad guy has like a reason for being bad, and like, oh, this bad guy isn't even bad anymore. Like that's also happening in whether it's Disney movies, comic books. Again, like for instance, like the Juggernaut is a good guy now. Like Venom, that even happened a long time ago. Venom was a villain and like murderous, and Venom's like pretty much a good guy. Those things are so common. So it's interesting how knowing that people's approach to writing these stories and whatnot has adapted and changed and matured and evolved, whatever you want to call it. Uh, it's it's inevitable that we feel like it's all kind of leveled out in terms of what we used to look for as like how edited is it, how censored is it, like are we getting the pure version, right? Like that curtain got lifted, and they're still finding other ways to toy with the formula.
Well, I would say is the live action adaptations is toying with the formula
Oh, for sure, and
where
that's dumb. I don't think anybody should be doing that.
so yeah, I think ultimately there it's less diluted. I think it depends on what you're seeing, but sometimes I feel like it is exactly how it was made in the East. We're seeing it exactly how it was intended to be watched and
Yeah.
viewed. Often with, I think since Philip is a voiceover actor by trade, there is a completely different style that, because they add in how would you the gruffs and how would you describe the onomatopoeias of like, the
I mean, yeah,
stuff
you've
that
got the effort noises, but
Americans
even
don't do as
yeah,
much.
that's still pretty prevalent, and I
But
will
I
say
guess
that
my point in saying that is that they animate to that though. They're animating sometimes based on a an actor's performance, and obviously vice versa, right? Some obviously that the actor is sometimes just trying to bring it to life what they see in the animation. But I think because of modern technology, they get to meet in the middle more now than ever.
yeah, I would agree.
And every once in a while, I like the dubs. If I don't want to read the
Well, and
subtitles the
yeah,
whole time and I
that's
want to be
come a long
lost in
way
the
too. I
immersion,
think
the dubs
originally
can be really good.
I think because of how much I loved certain original things, and that because of the fact that it didn't used to have as much of a budget, right? That things took a while to evolve to where you had and it was just a burgeoning thing, right? That all of a sudden there's all these people doing their best to make, mouth sounds, but like, adapting what you're saying to something that's in a completely different language. I mean, that's part of, like, for instance, like Speed Racer is another hilarious stereotype of like older cartoons that didn't get taken seriously because they had like the, oh, and like, South Park pointed out that stuff. Like it was hard. It was difficult. Yeah, it's difficult to adapt to for American actors. So those things have gotten a
Well,
lot
that's
better.
why there's a whole team dedicated to
Localization. Yeah.
localizing,
So
and
yeah,
adapting the
the proper
language.
amount of time and work has been put there for localization to make it so where it's also, whether you like the original or the dub, that they're comparable these days. But I used to be way more of a purist, and so with older stuff, I will still maintain that. But part of it just depends on which one you heard first, because I can also understand whichever one you like when hear first, it very well sinks in like this is how it is. This is the real version. So it's not to say that one is better, or it's
Right.
just that, everyone,
It's an
yeah,
interpretation
everybody just
of
will
the
have their
work.
preference.
What was the, last just for funsies, what was the immediate last thing you saw where you're like, "Dear God, they could have they could have actually afforded to edit this a little more where you're like, "What the hell am I even looking at?" Do you remember the
Novo,
last thing?
have you never watched Ghost Stories?
I don't think I have, no.
It is
Bonkers?
beyond bonkers. It is infamous for the fact that the studio was
Well, is
basically
that a modern thing, though? I'm saying, like, the last thing you saw
it's
in the last few years.
oh, I
'Cause
thought I
the last actual anime I saw in the last few years would probably be anime adjacent, which would be K-pop Demon Hunters, which is, like, very much made for
oh, are you
children.
just asking the last anime I watched? I may not have
There's
understood the question. What's the
it's
question?
it's a two-tier question.
Okay.
The immediate last form of anime or anime adjacent in my example, but also the very last, the most modern anime thing you've watched that was just like bonkers. This is clearly, how it was intended. This is exactly how they made it in the East, and they may have just
Oh,
dubbed
okay.
it or subbed it.
Well, so the most recent thing that I mean, genuinely, was just Dragon Ball stuff. Various Dragon Ball
Mm.
movies. But the last thing that I watched that was like this. This is exactly what. Did you ever hear? Have you heard of Baki?
I have. Is it on
It
Netflix?
is on Netflix.
Yeah.
It.
Mine was on Netflix too. It was
it
Devilman Crybaby.
I've heard of. Yeah, I've heard of that one. I didn't watch that, dude. Baki is the successor to Fist of the North Star. It is the most
Oh,
gory
it's
thing. It
gratuitous
genuinely had me
violence.
cringing at moments where I was just like, "Oh my god!" Even though this is a
I
cartoon,
wanna
I don't
I
know if
wanna
I
hear
can
about
watch
ghost
this.
stories though, because I really want
The thing about Ghost, sorry, the thing about I thought we were still talking specifically with the wildness of how dubs used to be. And so the Ghost Stories is famous for its dubbing in that I think it was something to the extent of one like a studio was getting shut down and just no they stopped even trying to like direct it and they just said just do whatever you guys
like
want.
to hell with it.
Pretty much. And so they said you guys just do whatever you want. They genuinely just you have to watch it. You just have to go look at the best of Ghost Stories. Just Google that alone, and you will find probably a 4 to 5 minute segment of some of the most ridiculous things that they said on there. It was truly hilarious. It was the actors just genuinely having
Oh,
the
so this is
times of their
from like
lives.
from an audio standpoint, like
Yes. This was
craziness.
from like a dub standpoint of
I guess I was thinking of more of the animation, like seeing either gratuitous violence or
God.
gratuitous sexual imagery. It's just
I thought that was
sometimes I feel like I've seen a lot of combination of those.
well, and that's why I
Where
went back
some
to
like
Bach.
female creature like a mouth comes out of is
Well,
formed from a
hell,
breast
there's
and
something pretty
eats a person
there's something
kind of a
pretty
thing.
rad about like that to an extent in the Dark Souls games. I mean, there's some pretty horrifying creatures, and those are very. I mean, it's Japanese designed, even though it looks like a European setting fantasy, but still, it is Japanese.
Well, we digress. So I think we did answer the question though,
Yeah.
and that is is dramatically less diluted to the point where there's no dilution. There's no change except for the localization aspect of it. Would you agree with that?
I would. And to put a pin in the present part, speaking of like monsters devouring people and things being brutal, I
Yes,
will
we're listening.
to throw back to one of our own shows.
Ooh,
I feel like we
callback.
would not have things like Scavenger's Reign if it weren't for the the
Oh,
boom of the 90s.
hell yeah! I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Both from a stylistic as well as content, as well as just the pacing where you've got
I would say that show's animation style is kind of anime
yeah,
adjacent.
that's what I'm saying. Like genuinely across all the aspects of it on multiple different levels between technical, artistic, etc. It is insanely anime inspired.
And I like when I will say this before we move on too. I like when Eastern studios and things take on like Western IPs. I remember like the anime form of like the Terminator. I remember seeing stuff,
Oh, the Animatrix
or
and
or that,
Batman
yeah, the
stuff.
Animatrix, and yeah, I remember being like, oh, this is cool. And then obviously we've done the same, so that is a good lead into the future because the world, Philip, the world is getting smaller, smaller and smaller and smaller. Sometimes for good, sometimes not so good. We don't have to go there, but for anime and animation as a whole, what do you think the future is going to hold for us?
I think it's just going to be completely new
You don't think it's going to be more of the
like
same, but just
players
more of it? Oh,
I
so
mean,
more
to an
more
extent, but I
studios.
think with something that is already happening that I've heard from friends of mine that are more in tune with the anime scenes
Yeah.
is both Korean and Chinese anime. Not just like Japan doesn't have a chokehold on it anymore. So I mean, there's that alone. But yeah, I think as everything continues to globalize and, technology just becomes more widespread as well as prolific, you're going to see really cool new subgenres and places that have never produced stuff like anime before, and we'll get their neat interpretations of it. So I think that the essence of it will remain the same. I think in a way that we will just be able to call these things anime, despite them not really maybe all originating in actual Japan anymore, which is kind of a very definitive part of the definition of what is anime, right? That it's Japanese animation, but maybe not anymore. Maybe anime is so solidified to an extent as just it's a genre or style that it's just, I mean, there are American anime. There are now, again, Chinese and Korean anime and others. And, I'm sure other countries are doing the same. And I don't have time to keep up with all of it. Resident Evil 9 is too good.
That's one of my gems too.
Oh, no way.
Was that your gem?
Yeah,
Was that your
it was
gem?
going to sneak it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I actually got a sneaker that I think you will
I got some sneaks
you
for you.
you will light up with,
Okay.
because I know what Philip likes
Oh.
in the film department.
Ooh.
And there was a movie I saw recently that I was like, oh my God, this has Philip's name written all over. Before we get there, I agree. I think we're gonna see a clear linear evolution, and we're gonna have those touchstone moments, those watershed moments of like, how are we going to evolve this practice? How are we going to mature this practice and keep that purity that now Western audiences are growing to expect? I feel like every decade has that movie or that show that's where it's like, oh man, this is the next clear evolution. And I think we'll get a lot more of that, and probably touch on subject matter and imagery that we've probably never seen before. I always, again, I will beat this horse to death more, is Akira. Akira is so special and has changed the trajectories of so many studios and modern films and things like that. But there's a lot of films that we probably should do whole shows on, like Perfect Blue in the 90s. And I know there's probably some really good examples from the 2000s and 2010s that I'm not even thinking about. So Philip, feel free to chime in if you're like, oh man, I feel like this raised the bar. But if not, guys, leave them in the comments as you'd like. But I think we're in the 2020s now, and it's just gonna get the world's gonna keep getting smaller. Yeah, I think to your point, anime is slowly becoming the world's animation and not just Japan's animation. Just like a lot of things in the West get adopted by the world. A lot of Hollywood films, and we think of some of the classics in 2001 Space Odyssey, or Goodfellas, or all the way to The Departed, or what's the last great movie that came out, One Battle After Another, something like, where the world's like, oh man, this is our film too. I think it just means that the future is bright with animation, and the things that going back to why we do the show, the things that actually bring us together. The music and the films and all of the amazing art in the world that actually connect us and not separate us.
I also did want to point out that one thing that really, I think, gave credence to some of this stuff was the seriousness that I know I've mentioned it in other ways, but especially with something like Cowboy Bebop, that has some of the most iconic music. It was just, that one was, as you've put it in other shows, lightning in a bottle. But I do think at this point, yeah, we've all had enough of a study on these things, that you've got brilliant people from multiple walks of life coming together to collaborate on stuff, and yeah, it's fair game now. It's for everybody, and there's no closing Pandora's box.
I'm really doing some soul searching and trying to think off of the cuff of like, what would we got a great thing from the 80s and 90s. 2000 would probably be like a Spirited Away, like that raised the bar forever, in this genre and medium. And now I need a 2010s. I think we're still in the middle of the 2020s, so we don't have an answer until the 2030s. But what would be the 2010s? What would be that touchstone where we realized Probably, I will say, to close a circle on our shows as we like to do, the fact that Dragon Ball Z is still going to this day.
Technically, it was Dragon Ball Super for a while, and then
Oh yeah, it
it's
was Dragon
something
Ball
it's
Z
already
Super.
yeah, no, it wasn't even
And
Z, it was just Dragon Ball Super. They
okay, yeah.
ditched the Z like that, like, it ended after Z,
And they
and then they
have
did
new plot
GT.
lines and new
Oh, yeah. Yep,
movies and
and they have
yeah.
new stuff. I mean, Akira Toriyama has unfortunately passed away, and then he had other material that they're, like, still like, "No, we're gonna produce this. He wrote this stuff. This would have been his dream." So, they've got more shows coming out.
I think that answers the question right now. The fact that Dragon Ball Z is still going strong to this day, that it's getting a new audience
'Cause it's
every
awesome.
generation. Okay, before we move on to gems and thank yous, who's your favorite character from Dragon Ball Z?
Oh, Dragon Ball Z?
Dragon Ball Z, favorite character of all time.
Oh, who's my favorite
Don't
character?
don't think too hard. What's the first thing that pops in your head?
I mean, Piccolo's pretty
Piccolo's. Mine's Vegeta, hands down. Love that guy.
he's right. He would be a good close second too. Goku's a dumb.
And on that note, guys, thank you for listening to our ramblings. Goku's a dumb. Oh God, that's gonna be the tagline to this show.
I'm sorry. Anybody who actually loves the show has to admit he's a dumb.
That is a
He's a
perfect
redneck.
place to
That's the
end.
whole
That
like,
is
they make him talk like that on purpose in the show. He's supposed to be an idiot. It's written in. There's nothing wrong with that statement.
that is a perfect place to close because this is where we put it back into your guys' hands. We're gonna throw the ball back to you. It's in your court now. What do you guys think? Do you agree with us on the past? Do you agree or disagree with how the present has unfolded? And what do you guys think about what the future holds? We'd love to hear from you. But until then, guys, thank you for listening. It's always a pleasure to chat with you about these
Thanks for coming.
things that are near and dear to our hearts, and we hope they're near and dear to your hearts. Now, we don't normally do this on Is It Art, the Is It Art segment. We usually just say goodbye, and I say, my little tagline, and that I love you. But we got a little icing on the cake today, guys. We got a little cherry on top with what we call the gem of the week. We're gonna do gems of the week this week on this show, so buckle up. We got a few for you to check out because we can't stop thinking about them. We can't stop talking about them, so we got to give them to you so you guys can get into them too. But before that, we got to hear from their sponsors. So we'll be right back.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is our go-to tool for remote podcast recordings. What's great is that you can record separate audio and video tracks, and it's all backed up on a secured cloud, so you never lose your hard work. Even better, it's easy to use, and there's nothing to download. So go to Zencastr.com, Zencastr.com, and use promo code Art of the Beholder to get 30% off your first 3 months with a pro account.
Now back to the gems. Mine are we already overlapped on one. I'm gonna keep mine short and sweet so we can get out of here and play some RA9. But yes, RA9. Me and my wife played a local co-op Reanimal. That was a lot of fun.
Ooh.
And then the one I had where I just assume you've already seen it, that I want to gush a little bit about. We could probably do an after hours on this guy one of these days, is Predator Badlands.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah.
I will say I will sum up the entire movie with this one sentence. I love me some Predator, but man, I have never seen a Predator film with so much heart.
So there's a musician I found. It's very much like hiking music. It's very much just natural, especially the stuff that doesn't have, where it's really more just music and whistling as opposed
Okay.
to some of the singing songs. But there's a guy named Ethan McNeil, just pleasant, naturey music at its best at times. It's been a nice little divergence from some of the other stuff that I listen to. Because you gotta sometimes when you're listening to double bass this and whatever, you need the
Give us the act name again, the
Ethan
artist
McNeil.
name again. Ethan McNeil.
Yeah.
Guys,
As
check
well
it out.
as just in general K jazz and K ballads. It
Okay.
was slightly fittingly for today, but I just went on a weird tangent on Spotify recently, and I regret nothing. In fact, I love it a whole lot, and I will send you a playlist. It
Do it.
slaps. It's
Do
so
it.
good.
Do it.
Coming your way. Coming in hot.
Coming in hot. Well, guys, if you like that, you know what to do. You can always check us out at novadayproductions.com. You can follow at _Novo_Day. Day is DE at AOTB podcast and AOTB.podcast. One has a dot, one has no dot. You can, of course, follow Philip at philipchurch.com. That's Philip with one L, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. You know what to do. And if you'd like to be on our show or sponsor our love child, you can always reach out to us at novadayproductions@gmail.com. But until next time, you know what to do. Be good to each other, and as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Written, directed, produced, and edited by Novo Day. Starring Philip Church of philipchurch.com. philipchurch.com. Intro music by A Company. _A_CO_music_ on Instagram. All other music and sound effects are stock from various outlets. Logo designed by Tom Justice of thejusticecompany.com. JESTUS. All rights reserved. Thank you again for listening.
We got some butts. Yeah, we got some butts.